Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
You probably know that every year on November 11th, Americans celebrate Veterans Day to honor the millions of men and women who have served or are serving in the nation's armed forces. But bet you didn't know the whole story behind the holiday. For starters, it wasn't originally called Veterans Day, but Armistice Day, to commemorate the truce signed between the Allies and Germany in World War I on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. The first Armistice Day in the U.S. was celebrated on November 11th, 1919. All business was suspended for 2 minutes starting at 11 a.m., and parades and public gatherings were held to commemorate the occasion. Later, America also began honoring its unknown soldiers on Armistice Day, a tradition that continues today. At 11 a.m. every Veterans Day, a color guard ceremony represents all branches of the military at the Tomb of the Unknowns in Arlington National Cemetery. In 1954, the name was changed to Veterans Day, following a national campaign to have the day honor all veterans, not just those who served in World War I. And did you know, for 7 years, Veterans Day was actually celebrated in October? In 1968, Congress moved Veterans Day to the fourth Monday in October so that government employees could enjoy a long weekend. But in 1975, President Gerald Ford returned Veterans Day to November 11th due to the historical significance. And that's where it sits on the calendar today. And do you know the difference between Memorial Day and Veterans Day? Both of them honor those men and women who have served in the military, but Memorial Day honors America's war dead, while Veterans Day honors all American veterans, living and dead. The U.S. Census Bureau estimates that there are currently over 21 million living military veterans in the United States. More than 16 million of these served during times of war, while 5.5 million served during peacetime only. So this Veterans Day, don't forget to say thanks to some of the millions of men and women who have served our country.
That is just one day. What about the rest of the year? Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, Veterans, Programs, and Services. Joining us to talk more about it is Will Ackerman. Will is the Director of Communications and Voluntary Services for the Nebraska Western Iowa Healthcare System, which is, of course, part of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Will, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
Let's start off with your definition of a veteran.
Well, a veteran is anybody who's served in the U.S. Armed Forces, whether it be active duty, reserve, or guard. Now, when we talk about VA healthcare or other benefits, that's a different definition because it really depends on when they served, how long they served, did they serve in combat, do they have a service-connected disability rating, etc. But when an individual asks me who is a veteran, it's anybody who has served in the military.
5 armed service branches. We want to put those up for our viewers, and if you could just walk through each of those for us. Sure.
So the Air Force, which I have to admit, I'm an Air Force retiree, so I have a preference to that. But the Air Force is the essentially responsible for the skies. The Army, they've been around for 200 plus years. They're ground forces primarily, but they also have an air component to it, and the Air Force actually came from the Army. Coast Guard, they patrol our coasts, as it would imply, of America, and the Marine Corps, which happens to be the oldest of all of the services, and the Navy, which actually is basically our ships and so forth, but the Marine Corps falls under the Department of the Navy.
Okay, and you are retired Air Force.
I am.
So take us back in terms of how you were introduced to this world. Well,
how I was introduced to the military. Well, when I was in high school, I was looking for something to do after I got out of the high school, and I'd thought about going in the military. Went to school for a year, went to college for a year, and then ran out of money. That happens. And then I started looking at the different branches of the service because I knew that they had the GI Bill, which would help me with funding for college. And so I decided to go Air Force because it just seemed like it'd be fun, and also I thought it'd be a great way to serve my country.
Okay, and your introduction to the Nebraska Western Iowa healthcare system, you've been with them how long, and how did all of that come into play?
Right. I've been with the VA Nebraska Western Iowa healthcare system for 7.5 years. I got into it after I retired from the Air Force, about 2 years after I retired. I'd worked for an ad agency for a year and also worked out at the Pentagon on the Air Force press desk. But the reason the VA kind of enticed me was because it was a way for me to get back into serving veterans, also in a career field in public relations, which is what I really enjoy doing. So, I'm blessed that I get the best of both worlds there.
Yeah, and you really are the go-to person. You're the point of contact in all of that. So I would imagine you field a lot of questions across the board. What do you find to be the most commonly asked question of you?
Well, the biggest thing that people ask is, am I eligible? I mean, that seems to be the biggest question. The flip side of that is a lot of veterans who maybe back in the 70s, before some of the rules had changed and eligibility had been enhanced, if you will. There were a lot of veterans back in the 70s and 80s who maybe weren't eligible for some reason. And the rules of eligibility have changed quite a bit over the last 20 to 30 years. So now what we do is we have a lot of veterans when we do outreach who maybe weren't eligible back then and say, oh, I wasn't eligible. And we're like, well, let's look into your situation because you may be eligible now. So eligibility is probably the number one question that we get.
Wow, okay. And veterans, of course, facing, like all of us, many challenges. And we do want to put up a graphic for our viewers. And I'd like it, Will, if you could walk us through, and this is just a small sampling of the challenges, but walk us through each of these, adding whatever you deem most appropriate, and then we'll come out and talk about maybe some proposed solutions for these folks.
Okay, great. Yep. First one, post-traumatic stress disorder, which actually has changed. They've really focused on calling it post-traumatic stress because the disorder aspect of it is something that is kind of a stigma. So even in the healthcare environment, they've really kind of focused on talking about post-traumatic stress. And that can be anything from whether you're in the military and you're in combat, whether you are maybe an emergency services type person like a fireman or policeman who experienced something traumatic, or really anybody that's experienced something traumatic. That's what post-traumatic stress is. It's basically just the lingering effects from whatever that traumatic thing was, and it can have a lifelong impact on you. It's not just those who are in combat, although that's what it's most associated with, but it can really be a number of different things. And the thing that's important to note about that was up until about the early 1990s, it wasn't even diagnosed or called post-traumatic stress disorder. We heard the term shell shock or the fog of battle, back in the old wars, but then in the 1990s, they realized that and defined it as post-traumatic stress. So that term has only been around for about the last 20 to 25 years.
So will help us here in terms of some of the signs and symptoms, because it can be like a switch, right? Somebody sees something, hears something, and it takes them back instantly to whatever it was that they were doing. And I think it's important, especially for the family members and those exposed to these individuals, to understand what that kind of looks like or feels like and be able to respond accordingly.
Sure.
Right.
Now, I have to preface this by saying, I'm not a clinical person, but, from working around veterans in the VA and learning from that aspect, and actually having been in Iraq myself, my last tour, post-traumatic stress is some people have really severe post-traumatic stress to where they can't sleep, they have flashbacks to whatever the traumatic experience was. It may be to where they can be driving down a road and and you think about IEDs, improvised explosive devices in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're hyper-vigilant because of what happened back there, and so they can be driving down a road and see something here on the side of the road, and it'll cause like a flashback or a reaction. There's a number of different things that it can cause. For some people, it's something that they have to get a lot of treatment, counseling, and even some medications to help deal with that. For some people, it's a lifelong thing, but it's one of those things. And again, not being a clinical, but just talking from my experience, I don't have post-traumatic stress. But like when I came back from Iraq, we had mortars that were going off over our heads and other things that were happening, and so I got diagnosed with what's called adjustment disorder, which is a lesser version of the effects of post-traumatic stress. And basically what that meant was that something happened that affected me, and I had to learn how to deal with that when I came back. And even today, when I go to memorial ceremonies for veterans or other things, it really hits me, and it really causes me to get emotional, because it takes me back to Iraq, and when we sent home our troops who had died. It really, to this day, this was 10 years ago, it still affects me quite a bit. And I'm on, I guess I'd say, the lesser side of the stress part of it.
Which, if not handled properly, can lead to the next item on that list, which is depression.
Absolutely. Depression, depression is one of those things that it can really creep up on you, and you don't even realize it's happening to you. Again, not being a medical person, it's one of those things where you can have something to where you're just not feeling right, to where maybe you can't get up in the morning, maybe you can't function, or whatever the case might be, and so it can affect your moods. It can affect the way that you function day to day, and for some people, they can do things like exercise or try to do healthy things to kind of be positive, think happy things. But for some people, they really do need treatment for that. And with whether it be post-traumatic stress, adjustment disorder, depression, the thing that's really important, not only for the veteran, but also for the family members, is one, to recognize it for what it is. Two is to get help. That's probably the biggest thing, is don't count it as, well, it's just they've been back a year and it's just something that they'll get over. Because I know veterans who were in Vietnam who, to this day, they're still heavily affected and have post-traumatic stress. So the biggest thing is recognizing and getting help.
Okay, thank you. And the next one is disability. So, it's a different life for people to be dealing with a disability. So what would you have to say about that challenge?
Well, when we talk about disabilities, there's many different levels of disabilities. You have the most extreme disability that could be someone that comes back with maybe a traumatic brain injury, which is the signature wound of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and that's because over 97% of our troops are surviving because of the personal protective equipment that they have. But the problem is with improvised explosive devices and bombs, what it does is it basically shakes your head and shakes your brain in your head, and so that's how you get that traumatic brain injury. There's other ways that can happen too, but it can impair you cognitively, it can cause depression, etc. And I know we were talking before that you're involved with the Brain Injury Task Force here in Nebraska, and that's one of the things that they focus on, as well as the VA, which is a partner with that, is working with veterans and others who have traumatic brain injuries or just brain injuries in general, because that can definitely affect how you function, how you react, and just your day-to-day living.
Right, which segues into the next one, which is employment, right? Which is a barrier for many, and trying to get over that hurdle. What would you have to say about employment?
Well, and this is the thing about like the first three things is, if you've got post-traumatic stress, or if you have depression, or if you have a traumatic brain injury, or a number of other different disabilities that you might have, it may impede your ability to have certain types of employment. Or if you're dealing with a mental illness, you need to maybe relearn certain skill sets. So one of the things that we do at the VA is we have what's called a vocational rehabilitation program. And what we do with that is through a program called compensated work therapy, is we have veterans who we teach them the skill sets. They go through counseling and case management to deal with the medical issues, but then we also work with them to maybe put them in a job where they're still patients. It's a therapy, such at the VA, for instance. We have veterans who are in compensated work therapy who maybe work in, we have a veteran that works in helping veterans with My Healthy Vet signups. We have veterans who work in our environmental management service. And really what it's doing is it's giving them the ability to relearn those skill sets that they need to get back out into the working world. But they're still technically a patient, and that's hugely important as part of the recovery process.
Okay, wow. All right, we have a few more, if you can believe that. Legal. Thoughts on that? Well,
a lot of times, I was talking about veterans who come back and maybe they're trying to deal with something, so they have an addiction issue, which is a huge problem for veterans dealing with depression or mental illness. And I mean, the one thing I'd like to say too is, people like to stigmatize people who have depression or who use alcohol as an addiction and so forth, or drugs. But really that's a way that people learn to cope sometimes. They use it as a coping mechanism. And sometimes that gets them into trouble because they may get a DUI, they may use illegal drugs, or other things that could cause legal problems. So it's there's a number of different programs that we have and that we work with the community to help veterans that might have legal problems. We have a Veterans Justice Outreach program who works with veterans who might have been incarcerated. In Lincoln, for instance, the Lancaster County Prosecutor has a veterans diversion program for kind of minor offenses, to where they can work with the veteran who maybe has a DUI, and they go through this diversion program, and when they're finished with it, a lot of times the charges will be dropped. So there's a number of different programs that we work with the community to help veterans with maybe their legal issues that arise from the after effects.
Okay. All right, next one, healthcare. This one's close to you. What would you tell us that's important to note about healthcare?
The first and foremost thing is that veterans who have served and are eligible for VA healthcare, they need to enroll. They need to apply for enrollment. Now, the thing that's important to note about it is not every single veteran who served in the military is going to be eligible. There are certain there's criteria for how a veteran can be eligible. As you saw in the early slide, there's about 21 or 22 million veterans nationally, and there's 9 million veterans who are actually enrolled in the VA healthcare system nationally. In Nebraska, Western Iowa, we have 55,000 veterans who are enrolled out of 161,000 in our service area. But the thing that's really important is, veterans are pretty proud people. Sometimes, they don't want to admit that they need help, or maybe they have TRICARE, for instance, through the military retirement system like I do, or they have insurance through their spouse's job or their job, and they think, well, I've got all my limbs, I've got all my faculties, I don't have, a mental illness or anything, so I may be eligible for VA health care, but I want to leave that for the veterans that really need it. But here's something a lot of veterans don't realize, is that for every veteran who is eligible, enrolls, and becomes vested, which means that they go through a vesting exam and then see a provider for like an annual appointment at least once a year, the VA, that's where they get their revenue per veteran who's vested. So even if they only come once a year, once they're vested, they are helping other veterans because that revenue that we get from that veteran being vested is helping us to be able to provide more services. So, you know, I always tell veterans when we do outreach that it's you are helping another veteran, even if you only go for that once a year appointment.
Right. Wow. Okay. Thank you. Final, housing.
Housing is a huge issue. In 2010, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Eric Shinseki, or the former Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Eric Shinseki, and President Obama set a goal to end veteran homelessness by 2015. And they set forth a whole bunch of different programs and a lot of money to really reach that goal. And they've done quite well. There are some communities, like Salt Lake City, Utah, for instance, who have said that they've ended veteran homelessness. Here in Nebraska, Western Iowa, we've worked with a number of community partners to reduce the number of homeless veterans and really try to reach that goal of ending it. And the way that we do that is we've got a whole slew of different programs under the heading of mental health specialty services, which includes everything from case management to dealing with vocational rehabilitation to getting them into affordable housing. We worked with a group called the Burlington Capital Group, which built what's called Victory Apartments down in South Omaha. It's a 90-unit apartment complex, and so through what's called HUD-VASH vouchers that the VA basically approves a veteran who to be eligible for these vouchers. The vouchers pay the rent, and so we work with a number of different landlords throughout the communities to get them into affordable housing, because that's one of the biggest challenges to veterans and one of the biggest causes of veteran homelessness. So, yeah, there are a lot of things that we're doing to help veterans.
Well, and I think that's important to note that there are a lot of resources available. There's you guys, of course. There's something called the ISFAC, and we do have a graphic that we want to put up for viewers to show this collaborative effort that's going on in our state. So if you could talk to us briefly in the minutes that we have remaining about why this is important for people to know.
Right, and ISFAC for short, basically. What it is it's a collaborative community programs to help service members, veterans, and families that they support to get services that they need. And it includes everything from the VA, obviously is a partner, a huge partner, veteran service organizations, which could be like the American Legions, the VFWs, nonprofit organizations, businesses, city government, medical community. I mean, just a whole slew of different community agencies. And the whole goal is really to, they say it takes a village to really help people and to have a community. And that's the way this whole thing works. It's a village. It's a community effort because, the VA can't do it alone. The service organizations can't do it alone. The state, the city, they can't do it alone. So it is truly a collaborative effort.
Okay, so spouses, close family members watching, wanting very much to pick up the phone. We all want to help someone help themselves. But there is that hurdle, you mentioned one, the stigma, right, to get over. And so those family members who are wanting desperately to help their loved ones, what advice would you have for them?
I would tell them the first thing that they need to do is they need to talk to their veteran. I mean, that's, they need to recognize if there's a problem when we're talking about mental illness or addiction or other factors. And there are so many programs that are available for our veterans. So there are a number of resources that they can call. One of the ones that, a lot of veterans are a little bit fearful of the stigma of going to the VA. But you know what? The VA actually is recognized by many independent organizations such as the RAND Corporation and the Annals of Internal Medicine, for instance, as being meets or exceeds the private sector in most areas of healthcare. So the VA, as the largest integrated healthcare system in the country, I mean, not just because I work there, but I'm a patient there too, and it really is great. So they can call the VA, they can go to our website, which I know you'll have up here in a second. We've also got community vet centers, as they're called, that were set up back during the Vietnam War because they're confidential. There's one in Lincoln, there's one in Omaha, and although they're part of the VA, if a veteran goes there, they can't share their medical records with the hospital, the VA hospital. But they get confidential counseling, and they can also work with the families in some instances. So it truly is a community confidential resource. But the biggest thing that I would tell people is if you think your veteran family member or friend, even colleague, whomever, has depression, maybe thoughts of suicide, addiction, whatever, get them help early. Call somebody. Call the VA. Call the suicide hotline, prevention hotline. Take them to the emergency room if it's really that severe. But the bottom line is you may be the person that saves that individual if they're truly in crisis. I mean, I can't say that enough.
Yeah, and I think for some folks, and God bless them, it's hoping that it's going to go away, it's going to change, it's going to get better on its own. We do have a graphic, and we do want to put that up for our viewers so that they'll have places to go here after watching this program. So nebraska.va.gov, and as Will said, Veterans Crisis Line is 800-273-8255, and we did talk a little bit about ISVAC. That is jointservicessupport.org for folks who want to go there to learn more about today's topic. Will, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your time and expertise, and for all you're doing to give back to these men and women. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
You bet. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.